I called him my son. He called me Mom. I met Caleb when he was barely 2. A mop of dark curls, wide brown eyes, and a silence that felt far too heavy for a toddler. His mother had left. No explanation, no forwarding address, just a note. And a boy who didn't understand where the warmth had gone. Daniel, my then boyfriend, was trying to keep it all together. Single father, full-time job, full-time fear of failing. And me? I didn't plan to fall in love with both of them, but I did. The first time Caleb let me hold him, it wasn't magical. He cried, screamed, kicked at my chest, but I didn't let go. I held him until he tired himself out. And then I kept holding him, because that's what mothers do, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. We got married a year later. Our vows were simple, but mine and my heart were bigger than any ceremony. I didn't just marry Daniel. I made a vow to Caleb too. You are safe, you are loved, you are home. He called me Emmy at first, then Em. Then one day, when he was 4, he ran to me after preschool with paint all over his hands, hugged my legs and yelled, "Mom!" I froze. So did Daniel. But I didn't say anything. Neither did he. Because in that moment, it felt right. From then on, I was Mom. To teachers, to neighbors, to the pediatrician. When I signed school forms, it read Mother Emery Callahan. And for 10 years, I lived and breathed that title. I was the one who taught him to tie his shoes, who stayed up through fevers, sat front row at school plays, bought extra lunch snacks because he liked sharing them with his best friend Liam. I was the one who rubbed his back when he cried over scraped knees, over nightmares, over that time his best friend moved away. He came to me for advice, for hugs, for comfort. He looked at me the way children look at someone who anchors their world. He never called me Step. He never asked about his biological mother. He had questions, sure, but not doubts. Because love to Caleb was defined by who stayed, and I always stayed. Daniel, of course, was grateful. In the beginning, he would smile when Caleb hugged me goodnight first. He'd tell friends how Emery is the glue in this family. But over the years, that gratitude turned into assumption. Assumption turned into expectation. And expectation slowly turned into entitlement. I didn't notice it at first, because I was too busy being Mom, too busy attending every soccer game, too busy stitching buttons and packing backpacks, too busy pouring everything I had into a child who made me feel whole. Until one day, something shifted. Something small, a change in Caleb's tone, a flicker of distance in Daniel's eyes. But I brushed it off. Because we were a family. Because we'd built a life. Because I believed love like mine couldn't be erased. I still remember the last time he looked up at me and said, "I love you, Mom." It was the night before everything started to unravel. At the time, I didn't know how precious that moment would become. Didn't know how deeply it would echo later. When he said something else, something that would change me forever. But for now, I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I love you more." And I meant it with everything I had. The day he said, "You're not my real mother," it was a Sunday. One of those quiet afternoons when nothing big is supposed to happen. I was in the kitchen preparing grilled cheese, his favorite. I always made it the way he liked. Extra crispy, no crusts, and a light sprinkle of garlic salt. Caleb was in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He had just turned 12. That strange age where childhood and adolescence crash into each other like waves. Soft one second, brutal the next. I called out, "Lunch in 5, sweetheart." No answer. I peeked into the room. "Hey," I said gently, "everything okay?" He shrugged. Didn't look at me. "You've been quiet all morning. Just tired. Want to talk?" He hesitated, then said, "You don't have to try so hard." I paused. "What do you mean?" He finally looked up. Eyes sharp. "You're not my real mother, so stop pretending." The room fell silent. Time stopped. My hands trembled. The sandwich on the pan began to burn. But I didn't move. Because how do you move when the ground beneath your love disappears? "Where did that come from?" I whispered. "It's just true, isn't it?" He said, standing. "You're not my mom, you never were." My breath caught. This wasn't the Caleb I knew. Not the boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. Not the one who made me macaroni necklaces for Mother's Day. This version, cold, distant, and carrying words like weapons. I turned off the stove, forced my voice to stay steady. "Did someone say something to you?" He shrugged again. "Dad told me I should know the truth. That you didn't give birth to me. That you weren't even around when I was little." I sat down. My knees couldn't hold me anymore. "Sweetheart, I never hid that from you. You've always known you had another mom. But I've been here. Every single day. Loving you. But I didn't ask for it." He snapped. "You just showed up." That was it. the sentence that shattered me. Because for 10 years, I thought I was building something. A bond, a trust, a family. But in that moment, all I saw was a child who had been handed words from someone else's bitterness and told they were facts. "You said you loved me," I said quietly. I didn't know any better. I don't remember crying, but I remember the burn. The kind that starts in your chest and moves into your throat and makes you want to scream into pillows you once held with joy. Daniel came home that evening all cowers. I told him what Caleb said. He didn't flinch, didn't ask if I was okay. Just said, "He's getting older. He deserves to know the truth." "Truth?" I asked, "or your version of it?" He shrugged. "You got too attached. You forgot he wasn't yours." And that's when I realized this wasn't about Caleb. This was about Daniel. The man who once praised me for being the glue now saw me as a placeholder. Temporary, replaceable. A stand-in for something he never appreciated to begin with. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor, held Caleb's baby shoes, the ones he wore the first day he called me mom. And I wondered, how do you grieve a child who's still alive but no longer sees you as home? When my husband took his side every time, the days after Caleb's words were a blur. He didn't apologize. He didn't bring it up again. He acted like nothing happened. But I noticed how he stopped hugging me goodnight. How he left the kitchen whenever I entered. How he no longer called me mom, just her. Or worse. "Is it a what to say?" Nothing at all. "Daniel?" He noticed too. But instead of helping, he made it worse. I brought it up one night while we were brushing our teeth in silence. "Daniel," I said softly, "I think we need to talk. If this is about Caleb again." "Of course it's about Caleb. He hasn't spoken to me in 3 days." He rolled his eyes. "He's 12. Kids go through things." "That wasn't just a phase. That was cruel." He shrugged. "You're too sensitive. Too sensitive." I had heard that before. In jobs, in fights, in all the ways people try to dismiss a woman's pain. But this wasn't about me. This was about a child I had raised like my own being told I was never his. One evening, Caleb stormed in after school, threw his backpack on the ground. "Why didn't you sign my permission slip?" He snapped. "What permission slip?" "For the field trip. You always sign them." I didn't know about it. "Because you don't care anymore." I was stunned. Daniel stepped in from the hallway. "What's going on?" She didn't sign my form. Daniel turned to me, eyes sharp. "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't even know it existed." "You always check his bag." "Because I was always allowed to." Now he hides things from me. Treats me like a stranger. Caleb crossed his arms. "I don't need her to sign anything. You can do it." Daniel took the paper and signed, without a word. No support, no pause. Just ink on paper and a clear message. I'm on his side. And that became the pattern. When Caleb forgot to do his chores and I asked him to help, "You're always on his case," Daniel would say. When he snapped at me and I tried to discipline him, "He's just expressing himself. Don't be controlling." When I reminded him of rules we agreed on as parents, "You're not his mother, Em, let me handle it." Each time it felt like being erased. Slowly, quietly, until I was just the woman in the house. Not the mother, not the partner, just the inconvenience. I tried one last time. One night after Caleb had gone to bed, I sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table. "I need you to back me up," I said. "He's hurting." "So am I." "You're the adult. I'm also the one who raised him." He looked at me like that didn't mean anything anymore. "But you're not his mom, Em. You know that, right?" There it was, out loud, from the man who once held my hand in a hospital room while Caleb had the flu. Who once told me, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to him." Now suddenly, "You're not his mom." I stood up, walked to the sink, gripped the counter until my knuckles turned white. "Then why did you let me love him like one?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Or worse, because he didn't care. That night I didn't sleep. I watched old videos on my phone. Caleb at 5, laughing in the park. Caleb at 7, baking cookies with me. Caleb on Christmas morning, yelling, "Mommy, come look!" And I realized I didn't imagine it. The love was real. But now I was being punished for loving too much. I gave up everything for them. There's a moment when the fog lifts, and you suddenly see your life like someone else would. Not as the woman who holds it all together. Not as mom. Not as the wife who understands. Just a woman who gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left. And no one noticed. I sat on the floor of our closet that evening. The house was quiet. Daniel was working late. Caleb was in his room. And I sat there, between old boxes and unused shoes, holding a photo of the 3 of us at the beach. It was taken 6 years ago. Caleb's tiny hand clutching mine, Daniel's arm wrapped around my shoulder. We looked like a family. We felt like a family. Back then, I remembered something. Before Daniel, I had dreams. I was going to start a small bakery. I had saved money for it, even rented a tiny storefront once. Then Caleb got sick. Daniel had to travel for work, and I told myself, it's just a pause. But weeks turned into months, months into years. My savings became Caleb's tuition. My mornings became his lunch boxes. My evenings became permission slips, laundry, and Band-Aids. I gave up my career, my independence, friendships, even my last name. And I did it willingly, because I loved them, because I believed that's what you do for family. But now, I was living with a man who reminded me daily, you're not his real mother, and raising a child who said, I didn't ask you to love me. I looked at my hands. They used to bake, create, dream. Now they just cleaned up after people who didn't see me anymore. At dinner that night, I made lasagna, Caleb's favorite. He didn't touch it. He ate cereal instead. Daniel didn't say a word. Later, I stood in the kitchen, washing dishes, while they laughed at something on TV in the next room. And it hit me. I don't exist here anymore. Not really. Not as a person, just as a function. I walked into the bedroom, pulled open the drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was my old business plan. Still bound, still hopeful. Handwritten notes in the margins. Little ideas like, call bakery M's Whisk. Try lavender shortbread. Open by summer, maybe? I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the pages. 10 years, 10 whole years, and the only thing I had to show for it was a boy who no longer called me mom, and a husband who let him forget why he ever did. I whispered into the quiet, what about me? It was the first time I had asked that. Because mothers aren't supposed to ask that, right? We're supposed to serve. Sacrifice, smile through it. But in that moment, I finally wanted to know, when do I matter? I stared into the mirror that night, not looking for flaws, but for pieces of myself still left. And I promised the woman staring back, this won't be the end of you. The birthday I wasn't invited to, Caleb's birthday, had always been my thing. I was the planner, the decorator, the baker. Every year since he turned 3, I had poured my soul into making each celebration unforgettable. There was the dinosaur party when he was 5, the magician at 7, the Harry Potter theme when he turned 9. And last year, his 10th, I stayed up until 2 a.m. making a treasure hunt across the backyard. He hugged me so tight that night and whispered, best birthday ever, Mom. That was just 12 months ago. Now it felt like another life. The week before his 11th birthday, I asked Daniel casually, has Caleb mentioned what kind of party he wants this year? He looked up from his laptop. Oh, didn't he tell you? I paused. Tell me what? He's planning something with his friends, small, just a few boys. Here at home? No, at the skating rink. Skating rink? Yeah. He said you didn't need to be involved. He asked if I could handle it. I blinked. So you're just okay with that? He's growing up, wants to do things on his own. Without even telling me? He shrugged. Maybe give him some space. I stood there, feeling like a guest in a house I helped build. A stranger to a boy whose birthday I had memorized down to the hour he was born. The day came. Saturday. I baked a cake anyway, just a small one. Chocolate with peanut butter frosting, his favorite. I told myself I'd give it to him later. Privately. Quietly. Maybe he'd remember. Maybe he'd say thank you. But he left that morning without a word. Daniel drove him to the rink. No, see you later. No, I'll save you a slice. Not even a glance. I sat in the kitchen. The cake sat untouched. So did I. I scrolled through social media that afternoon. Not to spy. Just to feel something. That's when I saw it. Liam's mom had posted a story, a photo of the boys, laughing, skating, holding pizza slices. And in the corner of the shot, Caleb with his arm around Daniel, smiling, full of light I hadn't seen in weeks. And in that frame, the truth hit me harder than ever. He didn't even notice I wasn't there. Later that night, they came home. I was on the porch with Max. The house smelled like frosting and silence. Caleb walked past me without a word. Daniel followed, carrying leftover pizza. Hey, he said, it went well. I saw, did you get any rest? Rest? As if my heart had spent the day napping. He opened the fridge, saw the cake. You baked? It's tradition. You didn't have to, Em. That was the last straw. I wanted to. He shrugged. Well, he didn't ask for it. I walked upstairs, alone, and cried on the bathroom floor like a teenager after a breakup, because that's what it felt like. A breakup with a child. One I had raised, loved, fought for. But apparently not enough to be remembered on his birthday. At midnight, I lit a single candle on the cake, whispered to the empty room, happy birthday, Caleb, even if you forgot, I never did, and blew it out, alone. He said, he was never yours. It happened 2 days after Caleb's birthday. The cake I had baked still sat in the fridge, untouched, not even a slice missing. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. because somehow it felt like throwing away the last 10 years. That morning, I woke up early. I was making coffee when I overheard them in the hallway, Daniel and Caleb whispering. Then I heard Caleb laugh. "She really baked a cake?" "Yeah," Daniel replied, amused. "She still thinks you'd want one." They both chuckled, and something inside me snapped. I walked into the room, quiet, composed. "You think that's funny?" Daniel turned, startled. We were just what? Mocking the woman who raised your son while you chased promotions and excuses?" "Caleb, go to your room," he said. "No," I said. "He should hear this." Caleb hesitated, then left, slamming the door behind him. Silence. Then Daniel said, "You're overreacting." "Am I?" "Because I don't think I've ever reacted enough to what you've done." "What I've done?" "Yes, you let him erase me. You handed him the matches and watched him burn the bridge between us." He scoffed. "You always make everything about you." "I made everything about us, about Caleb, about this family." "Family?" he repeated, laughing bitterly. "You were never really his family, Em. He's not yours." There it was. The sentence dropped like a bomb, and suddenly everything stopped. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." He didn't even flinch, didn't blink, as if those words had been sitting on his tongue for years, waiting. "You know what hurts?" I said, voice shaking. "I never needed him to be mine by blood, because I was there. Through every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee. I chose him. Every day. And now you're acting like a victim." "No, Daniel, I'm just finally seeing the truth." He stepped closer. "You always wanted a child, didn't you? Maybe that's why you clung to him so hard. Because you thought he'd fill that hole." Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I didn't cling to him. I loved him. And for a long time, he loved me too. Until someone poisoned that. Don't blame me because you couldn't keep his affection. I'm blaming you because you told him I wasn't his mother. Because you let him forget everything we built." He turned away. "He was never yours, Em. You just played a role. Don't confuse that with being a parent." Those words burned, but they also did something else. They lit a fire I had buried under years of sacrifice, and suddenly the grief turned into clarity. "You're right," I said. He turned, surprised. "What?" "You're right. He was never mine. And you? You were never the partner I deserved." I walked past him, straight into the guest room, pulled out a suitcase, started packing. He followed. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done the moment you let him call me her." "You're overreacting again." "No, Daniel, I'm finally reacting enough." I packed slowly, deliberately. Clothes, toiletries, my bakery journal. Then I opened the closet, took down one small item. Caleb's first pair of shoes. Tiny, worn, still soft in the soles. "You don't get to keep this," I whispered. "Because you never earned what came with it." Before I closed the suitcase, I placed something else inside. The untouched cake, still in its box, still perfect. Because even in Heartbreak, I would leave with grace. Daniel stood in the doorway. "You're really leaving?" "No," I said calmly. "I already left. You're just noticing now." I walked away without looking back. I left on a Tuesday. Not because it was symbolic, not because it was planned. It was just the next morning after I had finally heard the truth. He was never yours. I didn't make a scene. I didn't slam doors, didn't yell. I just packed. Quiet, deliberate, like someone who had finally stopped waiting to be seen. Caleb didn't say goodbye. He saw the suitcase, looked at me, and said nothing. Daniel watched from the hallway, arms crossed like always. Maybe he thought I was bluffing. Maybe he assumed I'd come back like I always did. But this time, there was nothing left to come back for. I stood at the doorway, hand on the knob. I looked at the walls. Photos of birthdays I planned. Drawings Caleb made when he still called me Mom. Then I closed my eyes, inhaled once, deep, and let it all go. When the door clicked shut behind me, I didn't look back. Not once. My car was already packed. Max sat in the passenger seat, tail wagging. He always knew when I was hurting. And maybe, in that moment, he was the only one who still remembered how much I had given. I drove. No destination. Just movement. Just freedom. Every mile away from that house felt like peeling off a heavy layer of someone else's version of who I was supposed to be. I ended up at my sister's. She opened the door and didn't ask a single question. Just wrapped her arms around me and said, "Took you long enough." The first night, I didn't sleep. Too quiet, too unfamiliar. But for the first time in years, I wasn't holding back tears in the bathroom. I wasn't baking cakes that no one would eat. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. In the following days, I found myself doing things I had forgotten how to do. Sleeping in, reading books, cooking meals for me. I pulled out my old bakery journal. The pages smelled like hope and buttercream. "Em's whisk," I whispered. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled with possibility. Then one evening I got a message from Caleb, just 3 words. "Where are you?" I stared at the screen, fingers hovering, and I didn't respond. Not yet, because he didn't ask that question the day I needed him to. The next day, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I didn't mean it, I was angry, please come back." He ended with, "Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you."